right, Karsten, I've let everybody in, so all participants should be in the room. If we have any more trickling in, I will add them as they come. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Megan. So I would like to welcome everybody to today's Bruker workshop at the online symposium on SEAS drug analysis. And of course, thank you for joining us. My name is Karsten Beesman, and at Bruker, I'm in charge of applications development at the newly formed Applied Mass Spectrometry division. And I'm mainly working on solutions development, in particular with our high resolution instrumentation, and then I'm also managing many of our collaborations. My co-speakers today are William Fatigante and Dr. Jürgen Kempf. William is an application scientist at Bruker, and from his time at IonSense, he has a lot of experience with DART. And Jürgen is a forensic scientist at the Forensic Institute in Freiburg. His institute is quite famous in the field of new psychoactive substances, and Jürgen is handling many of the routine cases in the field of forensic toxicology, but also some work on SEAS drugs. And he will share some of experience and case studies with us. I will talk about new trapped ion mobility and QTOF mass spectrometry solutions for the analysis of SEAS drugs and drug metabolites in body fluids and hair. So short outline of my talk is I give a short introduction to our mass spec portfolio. I have a few slides on DART, introduce our solution target screener, the benefit of using our recently developed VPC source for the analysis of drugs in hair, and also the benefit of trapped ion mobility, mass spectrometry, and our solution based on that target screener 4D, and a few slides on the identification of unknowns using high resolution of QTOF, or using high resolution QTOF. Here is an overview about our portfolio. We have the nominal mass routine, LCMS and GCMS solutions. Here the triple quads and the ion trap, QTOFs, TIMS TOF, MALDI TOF, and also LCs, GC, and the sources. For forensic toxicology, we are using mainly the compact and impact QTOF, the TIMS TOF Pro 2, and we do have a solutions, a target screener and target screener 4D based on these instruments. And based on the ion traps, we have the tox typer, and that will be introduced by Jürgen for his work. Let me start with a few slides on DART. And here at this conference, you have heard already some very nice presentations on DART. And also William will talk about it. So not too much to say. DART is combined with an MS, gives a nearly instantaneous determination of the sample composition. And here you see it connected to some of our QTOFs, the TIMS TOF and our triple quad. And we can switch between DART and LC or GC in less than 2 minutes. So we can use DART for very fast screening. And then if necessary, we can do more thorough analysis using either LC or GC. Here a few slides on the sample prep. The samples can be introduced manually and hold the sample in the DART gas stream, or we can dip the gas into a powder or swap and swap and hold it into the gas stream. And this means we can do the analysis even without sample prep. And but we also can do the automated introduction using the quick step cards, but other options probably William will cover. And we also have higher throughput options. What I did here was on our QTOF, automated library search for DART, AutoMSMS, that's data dependent acquisition of drugs on our QTOF. And what I did is I built a library of about more than 250 compounds. And here I have a mixture of methamphetamine and amphetamine, Here you see an overview, all the drugs that were found, and the extracted ion chromatograms of the identified drugs, and on every page an individual report on an overview spectrum and the library spectrum. And here the same, and then for the library you see also the structure. And this means from a sample to a report I can do this in less than 50 minutes. Um, um, the question is DART quantitative? And I was very curious about that. And the answer is yes, when you work with an internal standard. So what I was using here is a jump shot and connected DART jump shot connected to our impact. I ran a dilution series between 10 ppb and 10 ppm. I injected, put 3 microliters of that on the quick strip, and I was using 500 ppb as internal standard. So the linearity is really good. It's 0.997. I did 5 technical replicates for every concentration level. The RSDs are below 5%. And what you also see with broadband CAD, we see all expected fragment using DART with broadband CAD. So it means we also can quantify with DART. Now let me shortly introduce our target screener. That's our solution we use mostly for forensics, besides the tox typer Jürgen will talk about. And here's an overview about our target screener solution. What we do have is our ELUTE UHPLC or our GC connected to either one of our QTOFs or the TIMS TOF, and we acquire the data with full scan MS, and we also toggle with broadband CAD and also since quite some while the instruments are equipped with the PESI source. Important is of course software. And for the target screener, we mainly use the TASK software. That means stands for target analysis for screening and quantitation. If you want to do more detailed work using non-targeted work or statistical analysis, you can work with the data on Metaboscape. And also we have predefined reports and also export to your LIMS system. Now let's have a look. What is the benefit of the PESI source? It's designed to be really robust and give really good sensitivity. And here are some of the technical tricks we were using to get really good sensitivity, to have a efficient, highly efficient ceramic heater, and also introduce the heat at the right place to avoid thermal degradation. And what we also do have is active exhaust to reduce matrix effect and have less contamination and memory effects. And that also helps to gain sensitivity. What we did here is an example to apply it on the analysis of hair samples. The background information, the 0.1 nanogram per milligram is in Europe the cutoff level to differentiate between chronic and occasional use. And we had different samples at 0.09 nanograms, 0.03, and 0.048. The samples and data are courtesy of Professor Tagliore and Rosella Gottardo from the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Verona. And here in the next slide, we will look at the lowest level, 0.03, and we could even dilute it by a factor 10. We see nice sensitivity and see all the qualifier ions at the 1 to 10 dilution. Here it's already on the edge. For the 1 to 100 dilution, we can still see it using the PESI source and nothing with electrospray. And I've got the feedback from some of our forensic customers who now can change their sample prep to do less sample prep by using the PESI source. So that's good and saves a lot of time. Here is an overview for some of the other drugs and drug metabolites in hair. And the average gain here you see always with the star is with the standard source, the electrospray source, and the PESI source, and the gain is a factor 16 in average. Now let's switch gears and look at our task software. And the core of our solution is a database. The database contains a lot of information. Here, if you look at hydromorphone, we have the elemental composition. We have also accurate retention time. Out of the box with everything, the LC and columns we deliver, we should be within 0.22 minutes. Of course, software also allows to do an automated update of the retention time. And if you go on that, we have more information, what we call qualifier eins, and one ein can be selected as a principal ein for quantitation, and you also can select the diagnostic eins. This can be isotopes, in-source fragments, or broadband CADD fragments, and the mandatory eins are required to have a green scoring, and optional diagnostic eins are non-specific or are lower abundant eins. So here you see the workflow for the for task. It's firstly, we create the extracted ion chromatograms of the principal ion, in this case, hydromorphone. We do the peak detection and retention times check. This is the right one. Normally, we are within 0.22 minutes. And then we create, if we detect something, we create, in this case for hydromorphone, the diagnostic ion, like in-source fragments, broadband CAD fragments, isotopes, and adducts. And then we do the scoring based on mass accuracy, retention time, isotopic pattern, that stands for the sigma fit, and the diagnostic qualifier eins. And everything is within the defined thresholds, then we get a green scoring. And what also happens is, if we have a confirmed compound and a calibration curve is available, then the quantitation runs instantaneously, and that runs in full automation. And then what you get here on a different screen is an screening overview, and with the MRSQ traffic light score. And in this case, the first compound was confirmed. The second one has here some orange scoring, and that might require a manual review. And always all tables and views are highly linked and are available for in-depth data review and also, if necessary, manual integration. Good. On a different tab, if you do quantify, you see right away the calibration curve and everything that is required for quantitation. Like, for example, here the residual plot. And also you could here select which compound should be quantified, and you could easily switch between, let's say, alprazolam and solpidem, etc. And we do have also a lot of other features like instant quantitation results, automation possible, external or internal calibration, legacy calibration, standard addition, single point calibration, surrogate quantitation. And last but not least, we have a flagging based on the preset and user-defined calibration evaluation rules. And last but not least, the reporting and the connection to the LIMS. So now the question is, let me introduce, let me talk shortly about TIMS for the analysis of complex samples. And before we move further, let's review a few fundamentals and make sure that we are all on the same page with the terminology. Simply put, the collisional cross-section as a size of an ion and a measure of how often it will collide with neutral molecules in a gas phase. And just like with these two sailing ships on the right, more sails or greater collision cross-section means stronger interaction with the wind or gas flow. We've used nitrogen. Under the same conditions, we would expect the ship with more sails to move faster than the ship with less sails. Same with ions. Larger the ions with greater collision cross-section will interact more strongly with the gas and around them, resulting in different mobility. So basically, with trapped ion mobility technique implemented on our TIMS TOF, we separate ions based on their shape and size. And this means we can even separate isomers that have the same molecular formula and accurate mass. Now one more clarification on terminology. I spoke about target screener 4D. What does the fourth dimension mean? Firstly, we have retention time that's used since many years with GC or LC in analysis. We have, with the introduction of mass spectrometry, we have the mass or M/Z. Later then, in particular with triple quads, MS was introduced. And now what we introduced new is the mobility or the collisional cross-section value. Another thing that is important for the TIMS TOF is the passive MS scan. And you see here an animation how it works. It has passive stands for parallel accumulation and serial fragmentation. And we have a fast quadrupole switching during one frame. So for example, 100 milliseconds. And this was developed in a way that we can acquire MS spectra with a speed of up to 150 Hertz. That's ideal for very fast analysis with GC or LC when having narrow peaks or DART. And we also do have an improved sensitivity due to focusing of ions. But the question now is what brings TIMS technology to the table? So we can use the CCS value for the separation of isomers. We can use CCS as an additional identification criterion. And last but not least, we can use CCS filtering for cleanup of chemical background. Here are a few examples. One quite famous example is here. That is odesbutylvenlafaxine and tramadol. Very often in chromatography, they have very similar retention times. And so they have the same formula, same exact mass, and same retention time. The question is it possible to quantify them and having two isobaric analytes coeluting? And the answer is yes. The nice thing is they do have different collisional cross-section. And when you see the TIMS TOF, we see here a nice separation of the two compounds, tramadol and desmethylvenlafaxine. And we could either quantify based on the mobilogram or use the collisional cross-section as a filter to distinguish with them. And that is in particular also nice when working with DART, where we lack chromatography or maybe have interference from matrix. So that's nice. Yeah, as said, quantitation is possible, and as said, it's also beneficial for DART. Here is a few examples from, it's already some years old, that was published by our collaborator Francisco Fernandez Lima, and here looking at different isomeric opioids with the TIMS TOF. So, and we have seen many more. Now, the point, can we do what to do with the post filtering? And what we did here is spiking oxycodone in dilution series into urine, and with no filter, you see here a very noisy chromatogram, and this means manual integration would be necessary. With a broader filter, on the mobility, a manual integration of the qualifier ions would be necessary. And when we set a narrow filter, it can be fully automated. So that's really nice. And that saves also time and also helps to avoid false positives and false negatives. So what we can do is we can clean up chromatograms and spectra. So what I have not shown are the spectra, but then also due to the filtering, the spectra look much cleaner. And that helps to increase reliability of the results and reduce time for data review. And we also can use the CCS value as a criterion, and typically we have mass accuracy, retention time, sigma value, and the qualifier ions and the CCS value agreement. And typically the values are below 1%. And very, very short example about the unknown identification. So we have a tablet of an unknown composition, no match in routine screening. So the question, what is it? And we can use high resolution accurate mass, MSMS, for unknown ID. And here we analyze it on our impact. That's the workflow. We can calculate the formula using smart formula. We have a tool in our software we call compound formula, and search against an online database to retrieve structure candidates, and use matchFrag and do a match using in silico fragmentation and measured fragments to identify the structure, and could identify in this case cianolazepam, and that was Irodorm. And here on the next slides, a few more details on that. For smart formula, you see the chlorine pattern. You get here pretty good score. The lower the millisigma score, the better. And so that is here already the top hit this formula. The formula is calculated. Then we use this to get structures back, do the in silico fragmentation, and here in this case 8 of 9 fragments were matched, and then we get the right structure as a top hit. And as said, we could identify in this case Gerodorm. It's improved since 1991, not available in Germany but Eastern Europe. And now it's possible to either add it easily to this analyte to our target screener database or a spectral library when you have acquired MSMS data. Short summary: DART in combination with data-dependent acquisition and MSMS library search on a QTOF or a TIMS TOF or with PARSEF is very fast, and you can get in less than 15 seconds from sample to report. And that's ideal for these drugs. Target Screener and Target Screener 4D are complete solutions for screening quantitation for forensic using LC or GC connected to a QTOF or TIMS TOF with a high quality curated database with more than 3,000 compounds. Our database contains many new psychoactive substances, in particular synthetic cannabinoids, fentanyl analogs, and we have at the moment for more than 1,900 compounds measured, very accurate CCS values. And here's are the benefits of TIMS: very fast, additional separation well suited to DART or fast LCGC, separation, quantitation of isomers, cleanup of chromatograph spectra, and we can use it as an additional identification criterion. At the end, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would like to hand over to William. We decided to do the question and answers at the end of the session. Thank you very much. William?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, just switching over screens now.
Yep.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Karsten, and getting the ball rolling on DART. But today I'm excited to share some work we've been doing with implementing the NIST DART MS forensic database for an expedited evidence analysis. All right. So direct analysis in real time, or DART, is a technology that uses heated ionized inert gas to complete thermal desorption and ionization of chemicals for analysis by mass spec. Your sample does not have to be in solution. You just need to position a small fraction of the sample into the ionization region and can generate ions. Sample prep is minimal or non-existent. The DART source cutaway shown here depicts the major components. So inert gas, such as helium, flows through the back and passes over the high voltage needle. Electrical discharge is used to produce your gas metastables, which then flows through the heating zone before exiting the source to meet the sample in the open air. The open air supplies the ionizing reagent, a trace amount of water present within the air. So from that ionization region, the gases are drawn into the mass spec through the atmospheric pressure inlet to be analyzed. So as mentioned, atmospheric water is what is actually providing the proton through protonated water clusters. So we have the heated metastable helium that interacts with water to eventually produce these protonated water clusters that actually interact with the sample, providing that proton. And that's one of the major appeals to DART mass spec, is that it's a simple ionization process. You rarely see sample ion clusters with DART. You don't see those major adducts such as sodium or potassium adducts. And the primary ion is M plus H, or in negative mode, M minus H. So as Karsten previously introduced, that you can introduce your sample through a manual sample introduction or use automation to get a routine sample analysis. So some other sample platforms that we have is the high throughput, as Karsten mentioned. So here we have an additional linear rail that allows you to sample 96 or 384 sample cards. We have a 3D scanner, which allows for the analysis of the surface of a sample in two dimensions. We have our pin sampler. So this is a sample for solid or liquid residue, and each pin can collect a nanoliter level of volumes. We have our SPIAT kit. So these are C18 coated fibers used for extraction or sample cleanup of aqueous samples. And then lastly, our DIPIT module. So this is a carrier for our DIPITs, which are a glass capillary sampler. And all three of these use, again, that linear rail for that automated and routine sample introduction. So for this workflow specifically, DART was paired with the Impact 2 quadruple time of flight mass spec from Bruker. The Impact 2 has a full sensitivity range resolution greater than 60,000 and low picogram sensitivity to help deliver precise MS and MS data. So it's ideal for forensic analysis. The Impact 2 combines the robustness of an orthogonal time of flight instrument with a 10-bit digitizer technology that allows for compound detection and identification across a wide dynamic range. And just to point out some of the settings for the DART source, we are operating at 250 degrees Celsius with helium as our ionization gas. What I really wanted to highlight was we are only using a 3-second pulse of that ionization gas. So it's only about 3-second pulse per sample. So again, we have our fast analysis. So a recent 2021 article published in JASMIS looks at using DART as not only as a tool for forensic drug analysis, but also as a public safety monitoring aid. This study looked at discarded drug packaging material that was collected at concert venues, determining that a majority of the samples are made up of a complex polydrug mixture and were often mislabeled, further supporting the need for an accurate and fast drug ID tool. So herein, NIST has created an accurate mass forensic drug library of 1,100 compounds, all collected from a DART TOF, and this library is actively growing. This tool provides a fast workflow for forensic screening, and by using in-sourced collision-induced association, multiple cone voltage spectra of the sample are collected for the inverted library search algorithm. This is a free database and can be downloaded from NIST.gov. So the NIST NIJ Dart MS data interpretation tool is a web-based interface that is very user-friendly. The search tool allows for the user to add sample information. So you can add the date, instrument identification, and any general comments related to the sample or analysis. From there, the 3 data files are uploaded. So again, we're looking at different in-source collision-induced association voltages. So we need a low, a mid, and a high. So it's not true MS spectra, but we are seeing fragmentation patterns with the increased voltages. And then lastly, the user can set the targeting threshold and M/Z tolerance for the library match. So once you go ahead and search the library, you're going to see a page like this. This is the interactive page, so this is not the true report. But from here, we can see that our library match picked up about 8 different targets. However, only 5 of those, the ones highlighted in red, are target ions with possible matches. So since this is just a screen grab and not a working file, I can't filter through all the targets, but that's where the user can toggle through the matched targets. So again, for target 1, which is our 310 ion, is matching for methadone. So looking at this from the impact 2 perspective, as data is collected on the impact, the files are then converted into text files. So this search tool requires centroided mass spectra with files within the text, JSP, or CSV format. So once the appropriate format is acquired, the user will upload, as seen in the previous slide, the low, mid, high voltage files, and then submit for matching. For the impact 2, we needed to use the 45, 75, and 105 voltage for the in-source CID for the low, mid, and high voltage scan settings. So one of the benefits of using the NIST DIT is the ability to library match with multiple targets. So for example, here we have a mixture of methadone, oxycodone, and hydrocodone. So right off the bat, we can see strong match results for both methadone and oxycodone. But when looking at the hydrocodone, we get a positive match, but we're also seeing a match for several isomeric compounds. So in cases like this, further testing is warranted. So that could be your LCMS, TIMS, or even Raman spectroscopy. And as Karsten highlighted in his presentation, with the use of TIMS, we could begin to get further and more discrete separation between 2 different isomers. However, with certain isomeric compounds, the use of in-source CID can actually differentiate one compound from the other. So for example, we have hydromorphone and morphine, which show nearly identical spectra at the low voltage setting. So that's going to be our 286 peak seen here. And then once we apply that higher voltage setting at like 105 volts, we can begin to see discrete differences that can even be differentiated between the naked eye. So I just wanted to wrap up here and show you and present this workflow of how to get how to use the NIST data interpretation tool to generate reports. So here we can see how this tool can actually provide a fast method for drug screening. All right, so thank you for your attention. And as Karsten mentioned, we're going to hold off questions to the end here. And I would like to pass this off to Jürgen.
Thank you very much. Just trying to switch screens. Here we are.
All yours.
So good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to this workshop about TIMS, DART, and ion trap MS. And the title page here should already show you what I'm going to talk about. So global challenges and global solutions. The motto of this week will bring us to the southwestern part of Germany, to the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Freiburg. We are part of the university hospital and of the university, and there are probably working 60 people in the 3 departments of the institute, approximately 30 of them in the forensic toxicology lab. And before we start, there are some 3 preliminary remarks. First, we are not part of the law enforcement, so this means we rarely know how cases end in detail. Second, traditionally, the institutes of forensic medicine are dealing with the analysis of body fluids. Seized drugs, powders, pills, and all that is usually analyzed in the labs of the federal police or the customs service. So we are not dealing with things like that. Also, due to the proximity to the French and Swiss border, we sometimes get samples from customs service for a quick preliminary screening. So in conclusion for this talk, for me, seized drugs means everything that's not a body fluid, tissue, and so on. Today, the header of the talk was traditional analysis, and I think we are pretty traditional with a technique dating back to these 3 gentlemen, especially Wolfgang Paul, a physicist from Bonn, who in 1952 used radio frequency current to maintain an alternating electric field that isolates charged particles and atoms in a small space. He also came along with a way to separate ions of different masses and store them in the Paul trap, using a principle that was subsequently widely applied in modern mass spectrometers. According to Paul himself, he came up with that idea when he tried to stabilize an egg on a tray. And he figured to keep the egg on the tray, he has to tilt the tray slightly and constantly change the direction of the inclination. So according to some not so official Bruker documents, you can also think of trapping ions like this. Today's ion traps, of course, contain a lot of more technology, but nevertheless, an ion trap is still a very low maintenance and very robust type of instrument. And here you can see a cut of the trap itself, the ring electrode and the 2 end caps on the left and the right. That's where all the magic happens. And to keep the motto of the day, traditional analysis, we couple that instrument to an HPLC system. I will quickly guide you through the general tox type of workflow and the requirements when not analyzing blood or urine. What's the first purpose of that? So sample preparation is basically a series of dilution steps in methanol or acetonitrile, ending in eluent. A final concentration around 0.5 to 1 microgram per mil would be ideal. But if it's not a weighable sample, it's pretty much a try and error process. We will come back later why these solutions are so colorful. So the analysis is performed with a rather common gradient on an acclaimed C18 column. Within 11 minutes, the MS acquires full scan data from 70 to 800 Dalton, and the recording of MS2 and MS3 spectra is triggered by a scheduled precursor list containing retention time and precursor information of all the compounds in the respective library. So it's a classical targeted screening approach. After the run, there is an automatic library search. For seized materials, we are currently using an in-house generated library with 1,400 compounds. The Maurer, Wissenbach, Weber, and Toxtyper libraries may be used for a second analysis if necessary. The first one has just more compounds in there, mainly metabolites, and the second one includes the negative ESI, which is very rarely used for seized material. So after 12 minutes at all, you get a PDF report with all the findings, an overview on the title page, quality of the library hits, signal to noise ratio of the peak, retention time mass shift compared to the reference in the library, as well as the spectral comparison of all compounds found on the following pages. So literally the first page is what we are using to work on like 99% of the cases. So for us, drug samples come in all shapes and sizes, and I just want to walk you through some of regular and not so regular samples that we receive. So in this case, a car hit a wall at low speed, and in the driver's seat, a young male was found unconscious. And inside the car, everything as well as the driver itself was covered with white powder. ambulance and emergency physicians were called, but the man died at the scene. So the body was taken to our institute for medical legal examination, still covered with all the white powder, as you can see here on this picture of his ear. So we took a sample of the white powder during the external examination of the body and analyzed it after dilution with methanol. And the autopsy revealed some unspecific aspects of an intoxication. But by the time the autopsy was done, we already came up with the screening results, and cocaine and hydroxyzine were identified as main ingredients. Caffeine, as well as trace amounts of benzoylecgonine and econyl methyl ester, were also found. So cocaine and its metabolites were later quantified in femoral blood, and the case was classified as a cocaine overdose. So that is, compared to the DART thing, it's rather long, but 12 minutes is what we consider a fast analysis over here. Next case, as I told you, we sometimes get requests from custom investigations. These analyses usually would be done in the lab of the federal police or their own labs, but due to the proximity to Switzerland and France, they come to our lab for first qualitative analysis. This is usually because they can only detain a person for 24 hours without charges. So the officer showed up with this, and the suitcase itself was empty, but there was powder in the casing. So we prepared a 2.5 microgram per milliliter solution and analyzed it, and it turned out to be heroin with the typical opium poppy alkaloids and extenders. So a rough quantitation using a 3-point calibration curve led to a concentration of approximately 30 to 40% of heroin. So that's the information they need to continue to keep him in custody and do further investigations. Another powder, it's not always crime we are dealing with. This story sticks to the global aspect of drugs, leading us to Egypt, to a time approximately 1500 BC. This powder was recovered from an ancient Egyptian carafe and sent in by a museum to find evidence for opium consumption. So we prepared a solution, did some concentration steps, and analyzed it. And I will walk you through this results quickly. We find noscapine, papaverine, thebaine, traces of codeine, morphine, and normorphine. Intensities are getting worse, but peaks identification is good. We reanalyzed it using the Maurer-Wissenbach-Weber library. And I just want to point out the additional findings. In green, you can see the findings we already have from the first analysis. We find laudanosine, another opium poppy alkaloid, degradation products of papaverine and thebaine, and a hit for baldine or clausine degradation product, the latter being an alkaloid that can be found in many different types of plants, including horn poppy. So from the museum, that was seen as an evidence of possible opium poppy use back in those days in that region. Here we have a more routine case. Police and paramedics were informed by an emergency call by patient S that he and his girlfriends are in a bad condition after taking ecstasy tablets. So patient S was found somnolent but responsive on the couch in his flat and was admitted to the ER due to suspected drug intoxication. His girlfriend was found comatose on the floor after vomiting. She was cyanotic, spastic, with no response to stimuli, and require immediate intubation. So police investigation led to a local dealer that admitted the production of around 300 tablets he called Tomorrowland tablets, and that he was selling 6 of them to the patient. In the dealer's flat, around 75 to 60 different exhibits were found and analyzed by the police using infrared spectroscopy, GCMS, LC-MS, detecting a total of 15 different drugs and new psychoactive substances. Here you can see a picture found. It's for those tablets he called Tomorrowland tablets. The dealer was charged with drug trafficking, possession of narcotics, and attempted homicide. And the tablets were sent in for analysis to assess the potential health risk. So here is the screening result of the tablet found in the patient's flat. I put the recipe of the dealer next to it for reference. So just real quick, we have fluoroamphetamine, alpha PVT, methoxphenidine, and caffeine. Not really ecstasy, but at least all fine according to the recipe. But there is also PV8, diphenidine, and last but sure not least in this case, the synthetic cannabinoid ADP pinacar. There you see the extracted ion chromatograms of the compounds detected in the tablet from the patient and tablets found in the dealer's flat. So it's basically the same composition. Here are the subsequent quantitative findings in the tablets and the blood samples of the two patients. So in this case, ADP pinacar was considered the main toxic compound at a potentially life-threatening dose. Investigators suggested a mix-up of ingredients during the production of the tablets. Unfortunately, we have no idea about the final outcome of the court hearing here. For us, it's just the first synthetic cannabinoid intoxication after oral consumption. So because not smoking like usual, but oral consumption via a tablet. Last set of cases here will bring us back to the colorful extracts from the beginning. In around 2017, we started to receive paper samples from several prisons. So one of the first cases was this zip bag full of little paper snips found in the shoes of an inmate. We extracted the paper with methanol, resulting in these colorful solutions, made a series of dilutions in LC element and analyzed it. And in this case, we found several synthetic cannabinoids that were sprayed onto the paper. The findings in green could be confirmed by a subsequent GCMS screening, and the PX1 could also be confirmed after manual evaluating the GCMS data. Afterwards, the findings in red are false positives, but they can easily be distinguished from each other. As you can see on this page, on the left, we have a positive finding of 5-fluoro-AMB, and on the right, we have a false positive hit. Sample numbers went up since that, with a peak of around 400 cases in 2021. These are samples from prison A, where we found the synthetic cannabinoids MD-MB4-ene pinacar, and samples from prison B, as an example, where we found EDMB pinacar. And sometimes you come across some old friends like JWH210. Compounds may, of course, vary from sender to sender and change over time as usual with NPS, but in general, synthetic cannabinoids are the most common compounds found on those paper snips. But it's not only synthetic cannabinoids. Here we have some more samples. There are synthetic cannabinoids mixed up with other drugs, like in this case, for example, ketamine, or sometimes just other drugs like ketamine. Substances are either sprayed on the paper or the paper is completely soaked in drug solution and dried, which you can sometimes see with the naked eye. Sometimes it gets a little bit more sophisticated. Here are several pictures that were sent to an inmate, and we got them with little notes from the prison that says suspicious, the little yellow thing there. And when we analyzed it, it was like, we found out it's like a double layered paper with a little compartment containing a powder, which turned out to be cocaine. Or sometimes it's postcards from the family, also containing a little compartment, and this time it's buprenorphine. Overall, these things might get very excessive. This is true for sample size, as you can see here, where we got like 10 pages printouts from different articles from the internet. And Also, the number of findings can get excessive, so it's hard to see on the pictures here, but those pages have been soaked with drug solutions and subsequently tried. According to our lab tech, the ADB butinaka leaves like characteristic recognizable staining on the paper. So after the third or fourth case he had, he can already see with the naked eye if it's ADB butinaka. So he became very good with that. And all I told you now can of course be done with almost every type of LCMS or GCMS instrumentation, but there is an additional feature of the ion trap that can come handy, and we come back to the very beginning, to ambient techniques again. It can be handy if you want to distinguish derivatives of TMA like found on these strips. This is made from, this is data from the Federal Criminal Police Office here. They do analyze such samples with a TOX typer or with a former version of the TOX typer, equipped not with DART, but a DESI source instead of conventional ESI. And MS2 and MS3 of these three derivatives are almost identical, but the compound can easily be distinguished by MS4, as you can see here. So losing the retention time information can also be compensated by an additional MS stage, not only by CCS values. So in conclusion, the TOX typer is still the screening tool in our lab, not only for body fluids, but also for seized drugs. Sample preparation for these drugs, especially for the paper snips, can be time consuming compared to the analysis of serum or urine, and has to be adapted from case to case, and sometimes is really like a try and error style approach. There are limitations, like compounds, of course, need to be suitable for ESI, and the target screening always depends on the size and quality of its library. And as no single method is perfect for a systematic toxicological analysis, we of course also rely on GCMS and infrared spectroscopy if necessary. I would like to acknowledge Ronja Peter, who started the whole thing and did a lot of work for the libraries, and Lea Wirth, who combined all our libraries so that we have all in this big one drug typer, we call it now, and especially Moritz Roder, our lab tech, who is fortunate to deal with our routine cases like you see on the right here, which get excessive. And I'd like to thank Bruker Daltonic for their ongoing support and all of you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jürgen, and all of our speakers, Karsten and William as well. And thank you all for joining our workshop. I do have a couple questions that I'd love to go through. All right, let's go through the chat here. Okay. This one is regarding the TIMS. Can you separate fentanyl analogs using TIMS?
In principle, yes. So, but the thing is that sometimes some have very similar collision cross sections. Some you clearly can separate. There was some work done by a colleague, Elisa Schoff, at Fernandez Lima Lab, and she could distinguish all list along all fentanyl analogs either by GC-APCI or by TIMS. So, and that's also what we see with LC. TIMS TOF, that for some of the drugs we can separate them using TIMS, like the tramadol dimethyl venlafaxine, and also many of the opioids, and some can be separated by LC. But in general, we can use either or, and then total we can separate most isomers.
Thank you, Karsten. All right, scrolling down here. You mentioned that CCS values can be predicted. How do you do this, and how well does it work?
So we are still working on that, and it is implemented in our Metaboscape software, and it is and it's based on artificial intelligence. So there's some very, very smart stuff on it, and it's learning. And what we do is we build a model based on all the compounds we measure with accurate CCS values, and then the software or the model learns and can predict it quite accurate. At the moment, I would say we are better than 5%, but we hope to get better. But at least it gives another hint if you get a structure just to really reduce and gain certainty. And for many of the new psychoactive substances, it's not that easy to get reference standards. And if you have more tools to predict these things, that helps.
Thank you. Looks like the next couple are for William. How do you do the calibration using DART?
So in some cases, I was actually able to deposit like a tune mix directly onto the quick strip card and tune off of that. In some cases, I was able to just use direct infusion, use like the Hezi source on the QTOF, but there is some standards that you can also use like PEG to do like a calibration with the DART itself.
Thank you, William. And how long does it take to go from sample to report using the NIST data interpretation tool?
Yeah, so once you really scale up using some of the automation, when you can look at multiple samples at once and collect the analysis for multiple samples using one or two quick strip cards, the time per sample can really be brought down to, maybe a minute or so. And then with some additional scripting into the Bruker software, you can have it, the software kind of spit out the text files needed for the NIST tool. So the transition from Bruker software to the NIST tool is relatively seamless.
Thank you. And the next question looks like it's for Jürgen. Which NPS do you see most often in Freiburg? And how many new NPS do you see every year?
Oh, that's something I should have done some statistics. I'm not very into the urine and serum analysis we do. So that's our main business, of course. And for the seized materials, I have to say samples last year declined rapidly because prisons in our state, they started their own screening thing using an ion mobility device on site. So no MS, just ion mobility. And they pre-screen everything and they only send us now what they are not sure about and what they cannot identify directly. So I'm sorry, I cannot bring up statistics right now.
That's all right. Thank you so much for your feedback. And I just wanted to point out one more comment in the chat that I found very interesting. One of our audience members said, we've had samples from a prison where they've used the controlled substance as a sticky substance to actually seal the envelope. So that's something that I feel like you'd see right out of a movie. That's incredible how creative they can be. Very interesting stuff. But with that, that is the end of our questions. And again, I'd like to thank all of our presenters and our audience for joining us today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the symposium. And I hope also have a nice day wherever you are. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also, thank you from my side. Goodbye. Have a good day. And
All right. Thank you.